Today's topic is the top 10 mistakes people typically make when taking required minimum distributions. So we have in previous videos talked about what an RMD is, required minimum distribution, and how they actually work. You can simply click the link below to get a better understanding of what that is. But today we're going to focus on the mistakes in which people typically make when taking the required minimum distribution or not taking the required minimum distribution. Thanks for tuning in to Money in Motion. My name is Walt West, founder and CEO of the West Advisory Group. We're here to teach you how to prevent money falling through the cracks in retirement. And again, remember, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. So the first top mistake people make when taking required minimum distribution is missing the first deadline, right? So you're required to start that at either 73 or you can push it off to 75. What determines that is based on the year in which you were born. The IRS did not make this simple, folks. They really made this much more complicated than I believe that it needs to be, but this is just the way it is. You should look at the IRS tables to determine whether you're a 73, 74, or 75. And it is predicated based on the year in which that you're born. But let's just say for this example that based on the year you're born, you're required to take it at age 73. This is very important. So the first year you kind of get somewhat of a pass. So you're required at 73, but you're actually able to defer that decision till April 1st of the following year, that you could take that first distribution. But one thing you must remember, if you would delay it till April 1st of the following year, you must take two because now you're 74. So you'll be required to take two distributions in that year, which actually doubles your tax liability. So you must understand that reality. Now, there are rare cases where that actually makes some sense, but you should understand how that dynamic works. But oftentimes, you probably should take it in the year you turn 73. So the second top mistake is calculating your required minimum distribution incorrectly. So as we explained in our previous videos on how you calculate this, the IRS has come out with guidelines on how to do it. So there's these unified tables that they publish. So there's a unified table for you, there's a joint payout, and there's a single payout calculation. Depending on your personal situation, you need to determine which one of those IRS tables best suits your needs based on your personal situation. But it is very important to calculate that properly because if you don't, there are substantial penalties for under distributing from your required minimum, from your retirement accounts with your required minimum distribution. So the third mistake in taking RMDs is taking them from the wrong account. Now this is a big one. I have helped many people over the years to define how to structure their RMDs from their various accounts. Now listen closely. There is a firewall between your retirement accounts, your IRAs, and your 401ks or your 403bs. So you must understand the dynamic between this firewall. So listen closely. One thing you're able to do with your IRA accounts is you can aggregate all your IRA accounts to determine what your required minimum distribution is in totality with your IRAs. And you have the ability to take that distribution from one or all of your IRAs if you have multiple IRAs. You can aggregate those together. What you cannot do is aggregate your 401ks or your 403bs, those employer-sponsored plans, with your IRAs. They must be calculated individually. So each 401k or 403b needs to be calculated with their RMD individually and taken out of that account itself. You cannot commingle, nor can you aggregate 401ks and 403bs. This is very important. I've seen this mistake over and over again where folks have aggregated all of their retirement accounts, calculated their RMD, simply took it out of their IRA, and then found out that they underperformed. They under-delivered on what they were supposed to do, and they got a letter from the IRS, and now they have a penalty for not taking the distribution from their employer-sponsored accounts. So understand there are certain accounts you can aggregate, and there are other accounts you have to treat separately. Very important information. The fourth mistake in calculating RMDs is not considering tax implications. This actually comes with having a plan. If you have a plan understanding how you may be impacted by your required minimum distribution in the future, this really helps to alleviate this problem. In other words, any distributions that come out of your retirement accounts is considered ordinary income and will be taxed as such. So these distributions could really cause a negative impact on all of your other income because all the income is added together, it's all put on the front page of your 1040 form, and then it's calculated to determine what your tax liability. So there could be negative impact not only from you going from a higher tax bracket, or even potentially affecting other benefits that you might have, like Medicare premiums and other health insurance premiums that you might have. These things could be impacted by these required minimum distribution. It requires some very serious planning so you can better understand what this liability, tax liability, might look like when you do indeed have to start taking these required minimum distributions. The fifth area of concern when it comes to RMDs is ignoring inherited IRAs. So as you age and your parents age and you start inheriting assets from the previous generation, they often come in retirement accounts and they're considered inherited IRAs. Now the IRS, the government, has made significant changes to how inherited IRAs are handled. And you must take distributions from these IRAs either over your lifetime or over a 10-year period. And there are rules that you must understand to determine how you must take these required minimum distributions and or distributing the money over 10 years. You cannot ignore this. There's 5 or 6 different ways that this happens, and we often see mistakes for not understanding how to calculate as well as how that fits into your overall planning strategy. So I urge you to best understand your inherited IRA roles when it comes to required minimum distributions. The sixth area of concern is not coordinating your required minimum distributions with other income sources. You must take a look at all of your income sources when it comes to structuring your RMDs. Again, this goes back to the overall planning process. You should be able to visualize what your future liability would look like, what the income will look like from your required minimum distributions. The ideal world is to be able to position your RMD to help offset or help to enhance your overall income without having you to take more than you need for income, which obviously will cause unnecessary tax liability, which again will push your other taxable income sources into a higher tax bracket. So it makes sense for you to spend time to evaluate how your RMDs will fit into other income sources as you age in retirement. The seventh area of concern that oftentimes gets overlooked is leaving money to a charitable organization, a qualified charitable organization. Today, you're able to leave part or all of your required minimum distribution to a charitable organization. So if you're charitably inclined, you have the ability to offload tax liability by simply leaving a portion or all of your RMD to a qualified charity. Now, there are some prerequisites that you must understand in doing so. And one of those is identifying a qualified charity. That's number one. Number two, once you identify the qualified charity, you must leave your RMD directly to the charity without you taking constructive receipt of that money. That qualifies for that tax deduction. In other words, you pay no taxes on that required minimum distribution on which that you leave to that qualified charity. Very important to understand. The eighth area of concern is not adjusting for changes in life expectancy in beneficiaries. These play a big role in the required minimum distribution topics. First and foremost, life expectancy does change. The rules change. Tables change as far as how long you live. So there are changes to these rules. There are changes to these numbers when it comes to life expectancy. You must make sure you're using the latest tables that affect life expectancy. Also, beneficiaries. If you don't have the proper beneficiaries listed and you pass on, they're going to be either required to take required minimum distributions once they inherit the money and or take the money over a period of years, which is typically 10 years. There's many rules that follow this. So you must make sure that your beneficiaries are up to date so you have the best and most efficient way for them to acquire the required minimum distributions at the time in which they receive the money. The ninth area of concern is state tax implications. Not every state is treated equally. So different states have different rules on the required minimum distributions. Some are subject to state taxes, some are not subject to state taxes. You must understand the rules of your state to determine whether you have a liability in order to pay state tax on those required minimum distributions. Oftentimes, this is overlooked. The 10th and final concern is not seeking out professional help. Folks, I'm here to tell you that these rules are extremely complex. And with the recent tax law changes that have happened here, these are only more complex than they ever have been before. And they lend themselves to mistakes. Now, I just read off the top 10 areas in which that you need to really focus in on. I highly urge you to seek out professional advice when it comes to calculating and determining required minimum distributions into the future. You're only doing yourself a favor. As I have said earlier, there's substantial penalties for not doing this correctly, and you simply don't want to have that money falling through the cracks. So please, I urge you to seek out professional advice when it comes your turn to start your required minimum distribution. Once again, I want to thank you for tuning in to another segment of Money in Motion. I am hopeful that you found value in this segment and you can use this information as you're planning for your future retirement. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll talk to you real soon.